Hello everyone and welcome to One Teacher, One Scientist. Today I'm going to share some ideas on how a corner like this can be a perfect learning center for middle schoolers. Even if we don't have a big garden, we can just have these corners, little corners in our homes which can serve as learning centers. See how many concepts are hidden in a place like this. When you have different kinds of plants, so children can actually understand what is the meaning of species and population. This is one concept that is very, very difficult for middle schoolers to understand. So what you can basically do is tell children to observe the different kinds of plants here. Make a list of the different plants, and then perhaps suppose it is the money plant. You can also tell them, okay, count the total number of money plants that you can find here. And that the number of money plants then becomes the population of money plants in this area. Then we can go on to explain them how plants multiply. So, perhaps you find something like this, a plant. This is a very common plant that we usually find at homes. So, how these plants grow small plantlets, and each of these plantlets can then be grown into a new plant. So this is a vegetative way of propagating plants. So this can also be explained. Children find it very difficult to understand the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction in plants. So here, this is how you can explain to them. So how each of these plantlets can actually grow into a new plant when you sow it into soil. In the same context, you can see, sometimes you might just find a pot in which another plant is growing and you have not sown it. So you can use it as an opportunity to help children understand and think, evaluate, where do you think this plant has come from? We did not sow it, so where do you think this has come? So the concept of dispersal and how seeds disperse, and sometimes when they fall on a soil in which it can grow into a plant, that is how a new plant is grown here. So then you can build upon it that this is how plants grow from seeds, and this is how plants can grow from different parts of the same plant, from the mother plant. So sexual, asexual reproduction can also get done. Then you can actually ask children to observe the different plants and guess the habitat. Like a plant like this, you can actually tell them, okay, this grows here, but what is the natural habitat of this plant? How do you think this plant is adapted or suited to live on the mountains or on high altitudes? That is where the child will start evaluating it for its shape, for the kind of leaves it has. Why do you think it has these tiny needle-like leaves? And that's where the concept starts building in, that on the mountains they need to have this waxy coating so that snow can slide easily and these leaves do not rot. You can then go on to ask children, how do you think this plant would be multiplying? So the thinking skills get enhanced, and you can also convert this into a STEAM activity. The next you can also do is ask children to observe a cactus and list out the different modifications in this cactus. See how we are talking of modifications now. And you can actually tell them, okay, why do you think there are thorns or spines here? Which part of the plant do you think has got converted into these spines? How do you think this would be helping this plant to survive in the desert? And then a STEAM activity can be built. Okay, now if this plant had to survive in, say, a mountainous region or a place that at a high altitude, how do you think this plant will change or will need to adapt? What are the various ways in which this plant will need to adapt to survive in such a place? So, there are various things that you can actually teach children. Then a plant like this is a very common plant. You can actually ask children to observe the leaf and compare. Now the comparison things comes. So you can ask them, okay, now compare the leaves of this plant and this plant. Both can survive in the deserts. How are each of them suited to survive there? You will see that the leaves of this plant are fleshy and they store water in it. And even the stems, they store water in it. So there are various ways in which the plants have adapted or modified so that they can survive in the various regions of the natural habitat. So that gets done. You can also show children maybe a money plant. They can observe the different parts of this plant. How is this plant suited to climb on a support? So the climbing roots. If you see closely, money plant will have climbing roots. How are the roots of this plant different? So here we start talking of modifications. Why do you think this plant has these climbing roots? That also gets done. So children then start building upon the concept of why some plants or climbers need climbing roots. The thorn is there. The plant has reduced the number of leaves to survive in a desert. How do you think animals would be surviving there? So think of any 2 or 3 ways in which animals would probably be adapting so that they can conserve water. So you can build upon these concepts from here. The other thing that children can do is analyze soil. So what you can ask them to do is basically take a handful of soil, and then these children can actually gauge the pH, basically whether it is acidic, alkaline or neutral. And then children can be asked to adjust the pH of soil. So then they start thinking, how can I adjust? What is it that I need to add so that the soil is neutral? First, they will assess whether the pH of the soil, what is the pH of the soil, whether it is acidic, alkaline or neutral. And then how to adjust the pH. That also gets done. Then you can ask children to check the porosity. So they can take soil of this from this pot or maybe from some other pots as well, and then see which of them is more porous and which of them is less porous, and then how the porosity affects the amount of water that is getting collected. So then they analyze which of the soils would be most suited and how can we modify, what can we add so that the porosity increases. Why do we keep aerating the soil? So here you can actually make children understand that if we do not aerate the soil, if we do not till this soil, then the roots do not get air. So basics of agriculture can also be done. Perhaps you could give them a big tub here and say, okay, it's an old tub, now you create your little farm here. Go through all the processes, all the stages of farming and grow your own farm here. Maybe they could be given some wheat, the wheat grains can be sown and they can actually then start growing it as a farm and then see how much gets cultivated, how many seeds actually sprouted, how many seeds were sown, so that the percentage can get done. So, and when they are out, you can also explain to them how shadows are formed. They can observe how shadows are formed on the opposite side of the source. They can also make comparisons of this plant and perhaps another tree growing outside. So how the different parts are different in the two trees. You can also ask them, okay, now since this pot was kept outside, just observe all around and think which of the plants could be the mother plant. And then just think of different ways in which the seed would have traveled from the mother plant and landed here. What kind of special features do you think that seed would have had to be able to come from that tree and land here? So, the different concepts can get laid. Then, in fact, one of these leaves can actually be taken and the child can understand what do you mean by the cross section and the longitudinal section. You can even ask them to make a slide and view it. When you leave some water in, say, a stone or a ceramic pot, and you leave it outside in the sun, after a few days you will find algae forming there, and algae starts growing there. So what children could do next is just take a little drop of that water, or maybe take a little small slice of that algae and observe it as a slide. You will actually make children more inquisitive about their concepts. So then the cell, what are the different parts of a cell, also gets done. They see the different parts of a cell when they view that algae under a microscope. Even if they don't have a microscope, you can actually ask them to Google and check, how am I going to make a microscope at home? So you will find children making a lens microscope. You just find them making a bulb microscope. They can use a bulb to make a microscope. They can use glasses to make a microscope. And that is how they will then observe that algae, the different parts of a cell. Sometimes you might also find, after a few days, you might also find tiny parameciums and amoeba also growing in that water outside. So children would start looking at that little world in that pond outside. So there are various ways in which we can actually make children learn. And while one is in the lockdown, you can use these little corners all around in the house as beautiful learning experiences. So in case you are looking for any of these worksheets, supporting worksheets, or how to convert these into STEAM activities, do visit my site www.oneteacheronescientist.com and download these worksheets for free after sign up. Thank you so much for attending this, and hoping to share some more ideas with you next time. Thank you.